I was drowning. I was just struggling. And then that's when I cracked the code. And what I realized was that I had enough knowledge of life to be able to help start guiding people. And I started observing, I started studying, and I talked to all of the top salespeople that I could get in touch with. And what I stopped doing was I stopped begging for business and I started instead, I transformed myself to being an educator within my industry. We are on autopilot, whether we recognize it or not. We go through our lives in a subconscious state.
Mm.
And because of that, that subconscious state is going to hit the repeated patterns, have the repeated thoughts, have the repeated feelings over and over and over again, which is exactly why you get the same results. So to hack it, you have to be intentional. And you have to take your consciousness to train your subconscious. Here's something that you could specifically believe in, which is I have the ability to figure it out.
Hmm.
And if you can believe in that, everything else you can believe in regards to your own abilities.
I am super excited to have Dan Rochon here. Dan is amazing. He's a nationally recognized sales coach, author, keynote speaker. He has his own teach to sell methodology that he's going to tell us more about today because the fun and exciting part is that he actually has a book coming up. But before I even talk about that, let me tell you a little bit more. He is a certified neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, is a certified NLP practitioner. He focuses deeply on the psychology of influence and nonverbal communication. And you're going to see a lot of that today because he's going to tell us how he founded his no broke months system and his teach to sell system, which teaches entrepreneurs and salespeople how to shift from chasing clients to confidently leading without pressure, gimmicks, or the most important thing near and dear to my heart is burnout. So let's go ahead and Dan, introduce yourself. I'm so happy you're here. Thank you so much.
Linnea, thank you for the introduction.
I think NLP is awesome, actually, and that's probably where a lot of the sales comes in because, like, a lot of people don't really understand. I'm sure you'll talk about this, but like NLP is something I've studied for a very, very long time. Like you, I'm very into the psychology of decision making. People make decisions based off of how they feel. And so really understanding how to talk to people is key.
And understanding how you perceive the world and how others perceive the world and the different filters that we go through the circumstance of life, but we can get into that, I'm sure, during our conversation.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? One of the things I wanted to say that I think is awesome about you, and we discovered this, is that we both have this thought process around sales. And sales is I call it selling is service. And you're kind of the same thing where selling is about teaching, educating. So it's not just selling, it's about educating. So tell me a little bit more about your teach to sell method, where that came from, and kind of guide us through that.
Well, despite its name, Linnea, teach to sell is not about selling at all.
Okay.
Teach to sell is about what happens between two individuals
Mhm.
or a group of people and intending to be able to guide another person so that they can get what they want. And so that's really the foundation of teach to sell. It's understanding that you perceive the world through your circumstances, or I'm sorry, you perceive your world through your senses,
Mhm.
which your circumstance gets perceived through your circumstance. And then you have a thought about it, and then a feeling about it, and then you take action, and then there's a result. And so, because of that, when you understand it, that's the way that we as humans operate. Then you could take a moment, you can step into the other person's world, and then you can help guide them how to think so that they can get what they want.
Mm.
Now, when you do that, what happens is they naturally follow you. So if you're intending to be able to influence them ethically, teach yourselves the way to do it.
All right. Give me an example of what that looks like. I'm a
Yeah.
salesperson. You're coaching me or you're showing me. Give me an example of what that looks like.
Yeah. First of all, you've got to understand what's the natural, most likely feeling that somebody's going through? What is their emotional need, their internal pain and their external pain?
Mhm.
And we understand what's their internal pain, what's their external pain. I'll give you an example here in a moment. And
Okay.
then you understand where you want them to go. And that's going to be their desire. So we start, we have a pain internally, externally. We have a desire internally, externally. And then you as the sales professional, your job is to be the bridge between that pain and that desire. So let me give you a specific example. Let's say that you're a real estate agent, and let's say that you're working with a seller. What are the predictable internal struggles that they may have? Maybe they're afraid of, they have a kid's school that, it's their kids are going to a new school. Maybe they're going through a divorce, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, or a new relationship, or maybe, it's a job relocation. But in this scenario, almost every single time that real estate professional's client has something that's more important to them, or as important at the very least, but something that's pressing at the same time as making a move, which in of itself is a big deal. Maybe they're downsizing, maybe they have a sense of emotion to the property that they're selling, right? So there's all these feelings, and so now if I can understand what are your feelings, and I can step into your world the best that I can by asking you in-depth questions and really actively listening. Now I can then guide you not just about the process, but I can guide you about what you're going to emotionally feel. I can guide you to say, listen, Lynea, when we go under contract, a few days later, the buyer's their agent's going to come out, they're going to do a home inspection. And when that happens, a lot of times I find that my clients, they sometimes feel taken advantage of. They sometimes feel like the buyer's trying to get one over on them. And it's a perfectly natural experience for you to have if that's what what you go through. And so that's an example right there of teach to sell. It's understanding what's their likely emotions. Before we get to those emotions, we're going to go ahead and set them up so that if they do have that experience, now it's easier to manage. Okay, so imagine that you're that real estate agent. You consulted them up front on the predictable problems of the transactions, and now they've gotten to that point in the transaction where they're like, this son of a whatever buyer, they're trying to take advantage of me, whatever, 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 right? And
Mhm.
so, but you've already prepped them for that. So because you've already prepped them for that, one of a few things can happen. Either they're less likely for that to occur, or if it does occur, they're looking at you as the resource. They're looking at you as like, man, this person, they're really a professional because they knew this was going to happen. And now instead of evading trust, what happens is that connection of trust becomes closer. And the only thing that happened differently was the fact that I took the time up front to teach the sell, to communicate to that prospective seller or that seller of what they're going to expect. And that's an example for you.
So setting expectations up front
Setting
versus
expectations,
Mhm.
right, but
Go ahead.
not just expectations of
Mhm.
like logistics of it, right?
Mhm.
Like of it's going to be A, B, C, D. That is good, but setting up the expectations of what the predictable problems are going to be,
Mhm.
so that if those problems occur, and not only if the problems occur, what they're going to feel.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you can flip that. You can go to the buyer side of that. If you're consulting a buyer up front, for example, before the home inspection, you say, Mr. Buyer, 100% of the time, when we go to the home inspection, that home inspector is going to find 100 things wrong with this home. And just think, 2 days before that, you wrote the offer that got accepted. You went home, you tossed and turned, you were anxious, you were second guessing yourself. You maybe got into an argument with your spouse. You had buyer's remorse. The next morning, your sister sends you a text, says you're a freaking idiot for buying in this marketplace with the interest rates where they are. And all that happens. And then you can do a home inspection. The home inspector says, boom, 100 things wrong with that home. So again, you had that consultation up front so that if they experience everything that I just communicated, now that trust is earned. And the reality of it is that I've been coaching real estate agents and sales professionals, entrepreneurs for years. And what I've noticed is that they're mostly reactive rather than proactive.
Yep.
They wait for it to blow up, and
Yep.
now they're like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I'm like, wait, no, let's consult them before it occurs and it's relatively easy to figure out what the predictable problems are. And as you gain experience in your industry, you could be able to expand it.
Yeah, I think that's key, right? It's a matter of we are the professionals. So if people, consumers, like if you're buying something, whether it be a house, a car, whatever it is, I mean, how often do you actually do that compared to the person who sells the houses or sells the cars or whatever it is they're selling, right? You're selling, like if it's a house, once every 7 years, I think right now, 7 to 10 years right now. And unless you're an investor, which is a very small percentage of people, they're not selling houses all the time, buying and selling houses all the time. So I think that really, like, your method sounds like it really teaches salespeople to level up their service, essentially level up what they're providing to their clients.
It is, and it's not just in sales. It's just an influence. If you're
Mm.
tending to get your child to make their bed, if you're
Mm,
tending to get your spouse to take out the garbage,
got it.
whatever the case may be, because most people try to convince, but convincing, it doesn't work. The real power comes in guiding,
Hmm.
others to see the best path for themselves, right? So teach the sales about guiding those conversations in a way that empowers the other person to make the right decision. And there's a technology to that. I'm sure we'll get to that here in a few minutes, but there's a specific here's how to do it that I go through in the book Teach to Sell, that I teach the audience of exactly how to make that work.
Love that. So let's talk about the backstory. Like, where did this come from? Like, who are? I mean, we know what you do now, but there's got. Usually, I have found that the reason we develop something, we become a thought leader in a space, is because we experience something ourselves that we're like, no one else should be able to have to go through this. So, tell me a little bit more about the birth of wh- where we are today.
I was a waiter at a world-class steakhouse 20 years ago.
Okay, which one?
It's the Capitol Grill. It's in Washington,
Yeah,
D.C.
yeah. We have one
And
here in
at the
Seattle too.
time, Well, at the time, there was 6 Capital Grills. It was before, there's a company called Darden that owns them now, and Rare Hospitality owned them before then. And when I worked for them, they were a privately owned company,
Okay.
and it was where all the celebrities went to. It's where all the high level, like I could tell you name after name after name of our clients there. I worked there, and I was a struggling alcoholic. Every day I would drink a dozen beers, 12, a dozen beers, 2 bottles of wine, and I would pass out. And
Mm.
I would do this every single day from the age of 13 until my early 30s. 13, alcohol became my escape. In my early 30s, it became my cage. At that time, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to be a salesperson. I knew that I wanted to be able to help people achieve their goals and solve their problems, but I didn't know the pathway. Here I am, a waiter, in my early 30s. Here I am, a dysfunctioning alcoholic. And I met my friend Dave, and my friend Dave helped me through that process. Unfortunately, Dave was able to guide me through the process, but he wasn't able to guide himself. And a few years later, Dave passed away. And so during this entire you know, evolution of my life, here I am, I'm dealing with the loss of a great friend, somebody who really helped save my life. Here I am, I became sober. I just recently celebrated 20 years of sobriety, and I wanted to be
Congrats.
able to be a business owner, right? Yet had no way how to do it. So I'm talking one day to my friend Bill Cribbin. Billy says to me, "Hey, Rochon, have you ever thought about doing real estate sales?" At the time, I was, doing some investments, fixing and flips. I said, I never thought about it, but maybe. And so then I looked up, okay, a few $1,000s, 60 hours of classwork, I can do that. And there's no opportunity for there's no ceiling to this. It's like whatever you could put into it. So I got my real estate license. Well, my first 6 months, I'm all excited. I've got this blind optimism. Boom, we're gonna make this work.
Yeah.
And then, that was November 2007, and 6 months with no closings, zero. And I was drowning. I was just struggling. And then that's when I cracked the code. And what I realized was that I had enough knowledge of life to be able to help start guiding people and I started observing, I started studying, and I talked to all of the top salespeople that I could get in touch with. I mean, and they were really, really receptive to my conversations. And what I found was I found commonalities of what it was of what they would be able to do to educate the marketplace. And what I stopped doing was I stopped begging for business and I started instead, I transformed myself to being an educator within my industry rather than somebody that's like, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. I guess that works, but I think what works better is let me help you with a problem. Let me help you achieve a goal. Let me explain to you what the experience is going to be. And that's when my life transformed. And then that was 6 months. I had my first sale, and from month 6 to 18, I had a lot of sales, and I was able to buy the brokerage that I worked for in month 18. So 18 months later, after getting my license, I had a big brokerage. I had about 150 agents or so working for me, working with me, and owned that for the next 10 years. Sold it, wrote my first book, and that's my journey to today.
Wow. First of all, I didn't know a lot of that. So thank you. I love that I got to hear that. And congratulations on 20 years sober. That's pretty awesome. In fact, you remind me, I want to introduce you to another. He was just a guest on my show. And I think that you guys would connect really well. So, and he also has a really good
Awesome.
podcast too. So I'll connect you guys. But I think what I hear is you discovered this, there was no, you didn't want to go down this path you were on. And so you, just like most people who get into real estate, okay, like this was me too. In the first 6 months, I was like, yeah, like you didn't have any sales for 6 months. Then all of a sudden it went bam, 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 and exploded, right? And then you found your niche. You found your rather than what I thought was interesting is how you teach people to influence, but your niche was not being an influencer in a sense, right? Your niche really became more of like, let me guide you. So in doing this, like, go ahead. It looks like you wanted to comment on that.
Well, I was going to say for your viewer and your audience, I'm going to invite for them right now, if you really want to understand how this works, I'm going to invite for you to think back, think about your favorite teacher, your favorite coach, your favorite guide. And if you can, close your eyes for a moment. Think back. See their face, hear their voice, feel the way that you felt when they believed in you. Now imagine that that teacher stepped into your life today and they gave you advice. You'd very likely follow it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they earned that trust.
Right.
Okay. And so once you could really, like, if you just went through that exercise and if you saw that teacher, that coach, that guide, and you said, yeah, if they came in my life right now, I would follow their advice, right? And that's the trust. And so that's really the philosophy of sales that I've taken on and that I teach others.
Oh, I like that. That I was sitting there as you were doing that. I was sitting there thinking about who is that, and that's actually one of my leaders from one of my previous roles in corporate America, and he was the first one who really empowered me. It was almost like a feeling of empowerment, right? It was like it wasn't just that I knew what to do, but it was like I felt that I was trusted in what I was doing, which made me trust him. So,
Yeah. And now if he came in your life, if you came across him today and he gave you advice,
oh
you
yeah,
probably follow it, right? Yeah.
100%, 100%. I'd be like, absolutely, anything you say, because you were right the first time, you're gonna be right the second time. So yes, absolutely. Um, so in all of this, right? You bought your brokerage. You had 10 years of working with 150 agents. So there had to be some sort of development or design that you put into place to kind of build your systems, the habits, the environment, and the consistency behind your original no broke months, and now you're teach to sell.
Sure. Yeah. So if I would describe it, so there's many systems actually, right? But some of the simple systems that your viewers and listeners can take right now. So if you can imagine building a house, so you imagine building, so first of all, in real estate sales, there's typically, you look at the majority of the agents in real estate sales, they have zero sales. Okay. And that's always evolving. And every 2 years they're flipping out. Then
Mhm.
you've got your salespeople that have 1 to 3 transactions every 3 months. So January, 2 or 3 transactions, February nothing, March nothing, April nothing, May 2 or 3 transactions. And the reason for that second one is because what happens is that they get a client, they start working with that client or two or three, they put all their time and effort and energy into put that client, and then they forget it's 90 days for their next payday and they stop lead generating. All right. So again, zero is the
Mm.
most amount of agents that hit or miss. Two or three every 3 months is the next, and then you've got your top performers who have the consistency, month after month after month.
Mhm.
And so when you look at, say, okay, that's a salesperson in the real estate industry. Now let's build a business. So of that top, you have typically either salespeople or business owners. Salespeople are great, and there actually seems to be more salespeople in our industry than business owners.
Mhm.
But the challenge of being a salesperson is that if you want to take a vacation with your wife or your husband, it's hard, right? It is hard to then,
Yep.
if it's all relies on you, it all relies on you. So my recommendation is to build a business. And if you want to build a business, the easiest framework that I recommend is you imagine a building, a three-story building with a foundation of a basement. That basement would represent your belief system, and it would represent your belief in yourself. And so now that's the foundation of a business. It's that you have got to believe in yourself. Now that you believe in yourself, now we start building the building on top of that. And the first level, we'll call that lead generation. Lead generation can make you money. I take lead generation, I put it into three general categories: prospecting, marketing, and networking. They all
Mhm.
cost you an asset. Okay. Prospecting costs you time, marketing costs you money, and networking costs you time and money.
Mhm.
And so when you look, you say, if you're a new real estate agent and you don't have any money, guess what? That's going to be prospecting. Okay. Now, prospecting, why would you not continue prospecting for the rest of your career? Because remember, time's an asset. That's what prospecting costs. And there's only 24 hours in a day. So if you want to be able to continue to grow, then that's when you have to add on marketing. And so it would go prospecting, networking, marketing in that order. So that would be the first level, would be lead generation. Now imagine the second level. So we've got a building, we've got the foundation of belief, we've got the first level of lead generation. Now we've got the second level of organization building. So
Mm.
now we're gonna use leverage and build a legacy so that we can get people to do all the things that you suck at doing. Get somebody else to do it for you. Okay, get a system to do it for you, whatever the case may be. And then the final story, the third floor. So again, it's belief, lead generation, organization building, and then the top story is leadership. And my definition of leadership is to teach somebody else how to think so that they can get what they want. And that's what we do in leadership.
Love that. I love that. So in your book, your Teach to Sell book, what are you talking about any one of these pillars versus the other?
Yeah, it's every one of the pillars that I just shared with you
Okay.
is outlined in the book.
Okay.
And the book is the book tells a story. Okay, so the book, it's an inspirational story that gives you the tools, that gives you the techniques, that gives you the exactly here is how you could be the best version of yourself.
Mhm.
I said it out loud, but I didn't describe it. I didn't teach it. But I used what's called the self-coaching model. So
Okay.
that's one of the many tools and resources that the reader will get when they get the book. And so the self-coaching model is, you start with your circumstances, you observe through your five senses, and then you give that meaning. You have a thought about that, and then when you have a thought about that, you have a feeling about that, and then you take an action, then you have a result, and then the result feeds back into your circumstance. Well, what I just shared with you would be like a closed loop. So if you put those five sections: circumstance at noon, thought at 2 p.m., feeling at 5 p.m., action at 7 p.m., result at 10 p.m., and then it feeds back into the circumstance, which was at midnight at 12 p.m., then that's a closed loop. So I give you techniques in the book of how do you break that loop? How do you get, because if this is the way as human beings, is this the way we process the life, then guess what? If you're going to get the same damn thing you got yesterday, unless if you do something different. All right. And that's, when we're talking about the belief section, so there's a large part of the book which goes to the belief, and then it goes to the lead generation, then the organization building, and then the leadership.
Yeah. First of all, I think that's really one thing that I think is really important in working with salespeople, entrepreneurs, business owners. I agree with you 100% that, especially in the real estate industry, it's 99.5% salespeople. 0.5% people are business owners. And then in the entrepreneur space, it's actually kind of the same too. Because I mean, you do too, but we work with entrepreneurs outside of the real estate space. And I've kind of found a lot of it's the same, a little bit of a different problem or focus, if you will, versus like the real estate industry, but a lot of it is still the same. So what I think that you've done really well is you have broken it down into 4 really simple steps, or basically 4 really simple pieces. Like, you have to obviously believe in what you're selling. You have to believe in what you're doing. You have to believe in what you're teaching. You have to believe in, you have to believe in you, because when you're an
Yep.
entrepreneur, you don't have someone else's product that you're trying to sell. It's not like you're going to work for a store or even a car dealership where you know that you got to sell this, 2025 brand new BMW X6, and that's the product you're selling. It's not your product, right? When you're on the entrepreneur space, you have to. So it's really got to come from inside. I think the other thing is, like, a lot of people, that's where most people probably struggle, because if they can't figure that part out, they can't figure out the lead generation side. They can't figure out the organization side. They can't figure out the leadership side, right? That's really where the struggle comes from. So what do you recommend? And does your book go into this? People do when they're lacking the foundation.
There's several things that you can do, and the book does go through this. So again, you go back into uh, that that framework that I gave you earlier of the circumstance to the thought to the feeling to the action to the result,
Mm-hmm.
back to the circumstance. Well, how do you hack that? You can hack that by training your subconscious. And so what we do is, if you can imagine, like, just think about the time that you drove to the Wawa or the 7-Eleven or wherever it is in your neck of the woods, depending on where you're listening or watching this, right? You drove to the grocery store and you got there, you got out of your car and you're like, damn, I don't even remember driving here, right? You drove there and you were on autopilot. Well, the majority of our lives, we are on autopilot, whether we recognize it or not. We go through our lives in a subconscious state.
Mm.
And because of that, that subconscious state is going to hit the repeated patterns, have the repeated thoughts, have the repeated feelings over and over and over again, which is exactly why you get the same results. So to hack it, you have to be intentional. And you have to take your consciousness to train your subconscious. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. Most of what I do myself, which is to read, which is to surround yourself with great relationships with people who are going to pull you up, that are
Mm-hmm.
going to push you, who are going to cheer you on, that are going to have your back. Things like meditation, affirmations, visualization. The mind, for if you visualize crystal clear, the mind cannot tell the difference between reality and a visualization. And what happens is you go through these tools, exercise, prayer, and there's many that I outline through the book, and I actually walk you through. Here's how you can do this technique and be able to program yourself so that now you're breaking state. You're breaking what you got in the past that held you back. And now when you drive it's like you drive to the store, the way to the store, but now I gave you a shortcut, a new pathway. And
Mm-hmm.
so maybe tomorrow on Tuesday, maybe you go a different path and you're still in a subconscious state, but now you're in a healthier subconscious state because you're consciously programming yourself.
Neuroscience is fascinating. It is fascinating. The more, because the last couple of years, I've gotten really into studying the brain, right? And really
Yeah.
understanding, like, and this is where I think people need to, like, envision a picture of a brain, right? Like, we all have an idea in our minds what a brain looks like, but people don't realize there's 2 pieces to a brain, right? There's your prefrontal cortex, which is right here. And this is where, like, the cavemen, like, one of my coaches was really helpful in explaining this. This is where the cavemen lived. They live right here in the prefrontal cortex, right? So that's why I left your survival brain. So that brain, right, your forehead basically is meant to keep you comfortable. It's meant to keep you comfortable. The subconscious, because we're, as a human, I think we only access like 20% of our brain, right? So we really, unless you learn to do the things like visualization, affirmation, filling yourself around people who, like, show you it's actually possible to be more than, or do more than what you're doing today. Um, like you don't access that part of your brain normally. And so you really have to put these things in place because you've got to teach the 80% of your brain is your subconscious. So like you've got to teach 80% of your brain to like slowly drip into that tiny 20% so it becomes part of your survival mechanism.
Yeah. And then you start getting different results.
Then you start getting different results, right? And it's kind of fascinating. It's like, okay, so what do you think is the biggest, influence for you in this whole like you becoming who you are today? What do you think has been the biggest influence for you, or who or what?
Well, if I look at my order of priorities in life, my orders of priority are my sobriety is first, God is second, my mental health, my physical health, my spiritual well-being is third,
Mm-hmm.
my relationships are fourth.
Okay.
Okay. And that third and fourth is something that I've struggled with that throughout my life because it's like, am I putting myself first or am I putting others first? And then I finally got to the point, I was like, no, I have to be healthy to be a good dad. I have to be physically fit and mentally fit and spiritually fit for me to achieve the dreams that I'm intending to achieve. So I would say I have a lot of role models. I have a lot of coaches I've always had in my life, between 2 and 4 coaches at any given time. But ultimately my daughter is my inspiration for what I do and how I do it. And then I would say as a more of a tactical type thing, it would be understanding that, as you develop experience in whatever it is your profession is, that you then owe it to the consumer to be able to guide them effectively. And so the consumer really does still drive me. And it's because I believe that there's so few professionals in the sales industry and as entrepreneurs, as business owners, that I owe it to my consumer to be able to give them a different experience.
Mm,
Now, hear what I just said and revert back to what I said earlier about belief in yourself.
yeah.
I hope when you hear those words that you believe that I believe that I'm the guy that can help you. Okay. Because without starting at that point, then it's hard to be able to serve. And so and so that's maybe an example right there of just demonstrating like I know that I owe it to the marketplace, whether that be an entrepreneur looking for no broke months and needing some guidance, or in my industry, a client that's looking to be able to achieve a goal or solve a problem. I believe I'm the guy that can help them.
Well, and you sound very confident about that. And I think that's the other thing too. Like belief. Like people always ask me, this is not part of our plan to talk about today, but I'm going to bring it up. Why not? Because you brought it up.
Go for it.
People always ask me like, how do you become more confident? Right. And so it's like, I tell them, I'm like, confidence is like, it's like a 3-part formula, right? It's a 3-part formula. First of all, it's actually trying something. It's taking action. It's doing it consistently, and it's mastering it, right? So it's deciding consistently and then taking action. So it's basically like a 3-part formula. So do you think, and that's what builds confidence, right? And that's where belief starts to come from. So if you're working with someone who has
Yeah.
belief, zero belief, where do they
You only
start?
have to believe you only have to believe one thing. All right.
Okay.
And that's a great question because I recognize through my training and coaching that I was not giving you a complete answer. Previously when I was coaching, I would say what I just said without the next part. Here's something that you could specifically believe in, which is I have the ability to figure it out.
Hmm.
And if you can believe in that, everything else you can believe in regards to your own abilities.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, guess what? Whoever's listening to this right now, you're either looking at me right now on a 3x5 screen, or you have a 3x5 screen in your back pocket and you're
You're
listening
listening.
to me in some other vehicle, some other way on headphones or whatever the case may be. And right now, if there's something you don't know the answer to, you can go there, go to ChatGPT, go to Google, go wherever, and you can find the answer. And going back to the relationships that I talked about before, when you have relationships with people that have more experience in whatever it is that you're intending to do, that's something that I make as a habit. then you're able to then, get inspiration from them, get guidance from them, etc. But you can figure it out, and that's the only thing in the absence of experience to be able to have that confidence. That's what I recommend for someone listening or watching is I know I can freaking figure this out. So if I can figure this out, I'm good. And that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, there's a really good book. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's by Marie Forleo and it's called Everything is Figure Outable.
Linnea, the more I talk to you, the more reading assignments I have. I haven't started my last book that you recommended. That's my next book to read. So,
You're
but
gonna
thank you for that.
you're welcome. I love to read. I love to read. So I will always have
I like it.
a really good book recommendation. But she does in that book, she talks about how you just have to understand like everything is figure outable. It doesn't matter. Like you might not know the how, but the more you try to focus on the how, the less you're going to focus on the fact that it actually can be done.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like that kind of goes hand in hand with like everything. Yeah, I believe I can figure it out. Oh, by the way, my husband hates when I say that. He's like, what do you mean you don't know how? I'm like, I don't know. I'll figure it out when I get there.
I teach a lot of times. I teach when I'm asking somebody to come up with a goal. I ask them. I say, I want you right now to take out a bad word, the worst word you could ever imagine, and that's the word how. So, what is your goal?
Mhm.
Let's not worry about the word how. What
Love
is your
that.
goal? Right. Then
Ah,
the next part of that, here's a tool to figure out how. So once you say, I'm going to do this, then the next thing is look in the mirror, look back and who you see in the mirror and say, is there somebody in this planet that looks like that person looking at me in the mirror that has achieved whatever it is that my goal is? And the answer to that's going to be a yes.
hmm.
And now, then the next question is, what did they do? Now I do whatever the heck they did. Now I've got my how.
I love that. And it's funny because I always teach people my word. The worst word I ever heard is the word try. Like I don't
Yeah.
like the word try, but I think how after your definition just now is the second right behind that. Because
All
the
right.
how, you'll get stuck in the how, especially if you're trying to be an owner, right? If you're trying to be a business owner, you're trying to be an entrepreneur, you're trying to CEO your life, essentially. The more you worry about the how, you're never like the less likely you're ever going to get there.
Yeah, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Just as long as you have a reason to do so.
Yeah. Okay. Here's another book. You've read this one, right? Who, Not How.
Of course.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, I love that one. I had one of those breakthrough moments this morning when I was journaling. I was like, here's my who, not how. I just figured it out. Oh my gosh, it's amazing when you finally figure out that there's a who, not a how. It's a much better question.
I love it. I love it.
Um, okay, so I want to know like, how does what you've done, how did that shift your results? So stepping into like a teacher or guide the role, how has that shifted not only your results, but results for people you've worked with, and like your experience overall?
Yeah. So if you think about sales, and a lot of people think that sales is about pushing, and it's not. It's about leading. So if you're struggling in sales, I got news. You're probably doing it wrong. And the moment that I stopped trying to sell and started leading my clients, my
Mm.
business exploded.
Hmm.
And so really, I'm not giving you a very specific answer to your question, but I'm giving you a very general, like, listen, if you understand that your job is to guide another human being on how to think so they can get what they want,
Right.
then it's just simply understanding. I'll give you another framework that I go through in the book called the CPI communication model.
Okay.
CPI originally stood for consistent predictable income, and now it stands for consistent predictable impact. All
Oh,
right. So this,
like it.
so the CPI communication model is as follows. First, you connect energetically. All right. So we are spiritual beings manifested in this human condition. And we each have a spirit. And when I'm able to connect with Linnea's spirit and Linnea's with mine, and we're on opposite ends of the country as we film this, we could do this even in this method. But when you're able to connect with another person's spirit, with their energy, you can feel it. They can feel it
Hmm.
instantly.
Yeah.
All right. And that's what we call rapport.
Hmm.
So first, connect energetically. Second, ask adept questions. So an adept question is a skillful question that's designed to break past the surface, to go deep, to understand exactly what is it that you want to, what problem do you want to solve? Why is it important to you to solve that problem? Tell me more about that. What does that mean to you when you achieve that goal? right? You're getting into like deep, deep motivating questions. So number one is to connect energetically. Number two is to ask in-depth questions. And then lastly, it's to actively listen. And you're actively listening to the energy. You're actively listening to the connection between yourself and the other person. Because you could easily tell when that energy is broken. If the energy is broken, guess what? You're not going to influence at all.
Yeah.
So you have to start by entering the other person's world and then guiding them through depth questions and then actively listening.
Yeah, and the energy is super important. Like that's usually when I tell people, and I think we've actually talked about this, like within the first, I mean, I don't know about you, but the first time I meet someone, I know whether or not I want to continue working with them
Of course,
right
yeah.
away. And it's like sometimes it's just a matter, and I don't know what it is. Sometimes it's a matter of, you know, I don't like the posture. I don't like the word. I mean, it could be something like that. It's just there's something does not align. Something is mismatched there. So
Well, there's a mismatch of energy is what
yeah,
it is, and then we make a decision. Do we want to guide them, or do we want to say, it's such a break in regards to my energy and another's. It's fine to make a decision not to work with somebody, right?
yep.
That's completely fine. But guess what? You only earn that choice because you are doing your job on a daily basis, which is, going back into that first level of lead generation.
Mhm.
Like if you're not building that business we talked about earlier, then you're going to take on any client because you're not going to have choices. So
Right.
you have to lead generate to be able to have choices.
100%. Like I tell people, I like to say no more than yes to business these days, which is an awesome place to be in, but it's not like I didn't have to do that. I couldn't do that always. I used to have to say yes to everything and learned how to do the work to understand what I can say no to. Um, so real quick, I just want to know, like, where do you see, as a speaker, as a coach, as an author, where do you think your biggest impact lies? And then do you see that evolving, or how do you see that evolving?
Yeah. My biggest impact is to be able to help entrepreneurs, salespeople, small business owners to see a clear and direct path from where they are to where they want to be, and specifically from where they are to having no broke months.
Mm.
And I have spent the last 40 years learning, developing, documenting, journaling. You'll meet a lot of people like myself who are able to have what's a perception of success. And I believe that success is all perception, right? Because happiness and love, those are things that I think we can honor as success. But success in business, right, is a perception. And I have taken, you'll meet a lot of people that have a level of success, which is great, but you'll meet few people who not only have had that level of success and actually done it themselves, but then documented it and taking the time. It took me, Teach to Sell took me a good 6 years to write, and a good 25 years to learn. And I put it together in a way that's simple for somebody to follow, that's inspirational, that goes through and identifies what's holding us back, right? And what's truly holding all of us back as human beings is we believe that we're not worthy. We believe that we're not good enough. And that's a commonality in most human beings that causes us to not reach our goals. And so what's next for me is to pour into other people so that they can see a clear path for themselves, that they know that they are worthy, that they know they deserve it, and to be able to help them to achieve that.
I love that. And get no broke months. I
That's
want no broke months. I mean, who doesn't want no broke months? I love that. Where can people go to get more, buy the book? I mean, we'll have I have the pre-sale link, so we'll give the pre-sale link, but where can people go to learn more?
Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, anywhere that you like to get your books at. And if you want a free gift from me, you can visit our website, which is www.teachtosellbook.com. There's some free training in there. There's tools. There's an extra bonus chapter in there. That's www.teachtosellbook.com. That's the easiest place to get it.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much. This was great. Anyone who has any questions, go get the book. Just go buy the freaking book, because if you like what you learned today, I imagine you are going to like so much more when you get the book. Thank you so much, Dan.
You're welcome.